IG to Zoom real quick. We had invited our other homie Courtney to join us. So, IG is kind of limited to the number of people that you can invite to speak. So I'm actually going to mute everybody except for Courtney and Carolyn. And just talk about what is currently going on here in the Bay Area concerning COVID. Also talking about, some resources that people can get. But mainly we're going to discuss, some of these faith-based leaders here in Oakland, also in Richmond, who are being irresponsible in trying to encourage church doors being reopened. And I just want to start off with saying that I am not anti-church or anti-Christian. I am a Christian, but I also have common sense, and I believe in science. And I, fortunately, am able to attend a church that is led by people who have common sense and believe in science as well. But I think it's important for us to have these conversations, especially as it pertains to the health and safety of Black people in areas that are the most vulnerable to COVID. But I just want to allow Carolyn and Courtney to, just briefly introduce themselves and a brief intro, let everybody know who you are and what y'all do in the Bay Area. And we'll go ahead and start off with Courtney.
Oh, I'm first. Okay. So hey everyone, I'm Courtney. I'm currently a program coordinator at Homeownership San Francisco, working with the first time home buyer program and also post-purchase education and foreclosure prevention. I sit on a few boards and commissions throughout Alameda County, and I'm a mom and also the daughter and granddaughter of seniors who are high risk for COVID.
Go ahead, Courtney. I'm sorry. I apologize. Were you done, Courtney?
What happened?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm done.
Okay. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Okay, I am Carolyn Wysinger. I am the most busiest unemployed person that you know, and I am fortunate that I became unemployed 1 month before the Rona, so I didn't have to wait for my unemployment to come through. Yes, thank you, Jesus. I am also the host of the C-Dub show that Courtney is also on with me, and I do a lot of things all around the community. I'm also the president of San Francisco Pride, which of course is taking up all of my time and energies. And yeah, just an all-around shit talker, but talker of truth. Definitely like to talk about the complex relationship with the community and in the Black church. I grew up in the Black church all my life, from my years in Louisiana, and I am very proud of the fact of being churchy for no reason. So I'm very interested, especially having talked to some of my faith-based minister friends, and also seeing the bishop's sermon this morning. I'm excited to talk about this topic. That's it. You on mute, Chaney.
I saw that damn sermon. It was we'll get into that definitely today. So I guess we could just start off talking about, like, what does church mean to you, and leadership, in the church. And before we go on, I'm Chaney Turner, town biz, social life, Oakland resident, native, lover of Oakland, and also cannabis and community advocate. I am from East Oakland, District 7. I currently still live in District 7. And I grew up going to church. Actually, my childhood church home is just a few blocks away from Axwell Gospel, Bethel Missionary Baptist Church. And like I said, that's the church that I grew up in. My grandparents were founding members from when they were in Alameda and then came to East Oakland. And so that area is of course has a lot of sentimental meaning to me. I also know that there is churches in that area that share some of the same views as Acts. One of the main reasons why I stopped going to Bethel is because it's homophobic. It's homophobic. The current pastor is extremely homophobic and doesn't hide it at all. And I know the last 2 times I attended church there, one was for my grandmother's funeral, and the second was, I think, Mother's Day weekend when my mother asked me to go. And the sermon was just so terribly homophobic that I just told my mother I would never return to that church, wrote a Facebook about it and called them out because we need to talk about it. And I feel that one of the main reasons why we have churches that have low numbers of congregants now that aren't progressive is because of misogyny and, you know, homophobia. But yeah, that is kind of my background. Like I said, of growing up in the church, and you know, pretty much I had to go to church until I was 18. I had no option. My mom was like, well, when you're 18, you can decide whether or not you want to go or not. But that is pretty much how, you know, I experienced church until I found a church home that better resonated with me and my own personal beliefs and values. Courtney, I'm trying to take you off mute in case you wanted to participate.
Oh no, I had muted myself because I thought the baby was gonna start up, so I was letting you do your thing without
Hi,
Cruz in the background.
Cruz.
Can you say hi?
Welcome to the drama that is the C-Dub show. I think all of our first episodes at some point included people wailing in the background for no reason, yelling at us.
Because he was like 2 and he was really talking and yelling and it was like, bruh, calm down. And then Carolyn found out how to edit him out.
There was one episode, every time Courtney would talk, he would just start yelling. I'm like, that is rude.
Yeah, Courtney just had a baby, little Cruz. He's hella adorable. Like, I mean, all of y'all adorable. It's ridiculous. But yeah, pretty much that is, you know, was kind of my upbringing, you know, in the church until I was able to find my own church home that I could have a relationship with. What about you, Carolyn?
We're talking about our histories in the church house.
Yeah. I know you from Louisiana, so you guys probably got some.
I'm from Richmond by way of DeRidder, Louisiana, and I like to tell people that if I did not know that I was not conceived in the church, if I didn't know that my mama was a good, pure, holy woman and would never conceive of a child in the church, I would think that I was, because that's how long and how deep that I have always been in church. I mean, growing up in Louisiana, my grandfather was the head deacon. My great uncle was not only the first Black councilman in the city of DeRidder, he was the pastor of he was actually the pastor of 2 churches. That was back in the time when pastors would pastor multiple churches. He was the pastor of 2 churches for 35 years. Yeah, so that was then, and we came here to Richmond, and our family has been with our church in Richmond for about the same amount of time. because we can continuously go back and forth between here and Louisiana. So we've been at Pilgrim Rest in Richmond since 19, I don't know, 50 something. I don't know. I don't currently attend Pilgrim Rest. I actually go to Wellsprings Worship Center in Emeryville, which is pastored by one of my play cousins that I grew up with at Pilgrim Rest. So it's the same thing. Right now, since the building that Wellspring is in is closed because it's a school, they're actually doing both of their virtual broadcasts from the Pilgrim Rest building. So I mean, I've been in the church a long, long time, and know a lot of especially the Bay Area bishops and pastors, and a lot of the pastors in the Bay Area are people who I grew up with singing in the choir, and now they pastors. That's a whole nother conversation. Yeah, I have a very long and storied history.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I was like, if I would talk about this with anybody, it has to be you. Not only are you the homie and, I have a lot of love and respect, but we have had numerous conversations throughout the years about church, the Black church, homophobia within the Black church, and everything. And so, yeah, why don't we just get into the meat of what we came to talk about today, which is, Pastor Bob. And it isn't to single out Acts full gospel or, trying to attack people, but I'm tired of false prophets out here just not speaking for us. You're not speaking for us. I caught the tail end of his sermon today, which was trash, by the way. And honestly, he didn't even answer the question that he said he was coming to talk about. I don't know if he, chimed in on it earlier, but for 15 minutes, all I heard was being submissive to your husband and other, other gaslighting around
not anointed man of God and being careful.
Yeah.
So here's the very difficult thing about what he said, because what he gave, and I don't know the actual passage. I should have probably invited my sister on here. I probably have time, but there is an actual passage that talks about talking about the man of God or not touching my anointed or something like that. But I think there's a lot of times that ministers misuse that. They misuse that scripture in order to tell you not to tell them what to do. But if you are not acting in the way of an anointed, and people have been saying this since the government basically stated that churches were not listed essential, which we're going to get to that because that's a very important part of this conversation. You are going to start to see, not even just in church, you're going to start to see the leaders who are actual leaders and the leaders who are profit building, or the leaders who are looking for ego boost. And you're seeing that with a lot of Black ministers, and you're seeing them use that exact scripture to validate the fact that you should not, don't reprimand them, or else God is going to reprimand you, which is trash.
Right, because one of the things that he said the husband is head of the wife, right? Husband's head of the wife, and who's the head of the house? And he's talking about God or whatever, and that it doesn't matter. Basically, he was trying to say that man is head of the house, is head of the wife, God is head of the house, and Gavin Newsom and the president and these other people are not ahead of God. Listen, like I said in the beginning, I believe in science. Okay, you can pray, but you can also believe in science. People are out here dying, like literally dying.
Absolutely.
And for you to be using your pulpit,
God gave you science.
Sure did.
Exactly.
To make better decisions.
Can I tap in real quick and say this? So outside of, I'm wasn't brought up in the church in a really dedicated way. And I'm Catholic because I like that the church services are a lot shorter, and we get in and out. We on a timeline. It's an hour and 15. You get your blessings and you go on out. But I have actually been taking a certification course for contact tracing. And I actually really suggest, even if you don't want to get involved with um, the campaign around how to prevent the spread of COVID, I actually suggest people take the course because there's a lot of misinformation around how people there, even with everything going on in the news, it's like 24/7 COVID coverage. There's still a lot of misconceptions and misinformation about how COVID is actually spread.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people really need to recognize like how very easily it is to contract this disease if you're not careful. And I think really what bothers me outside of as someone who wasn't like really raised in the church, what really tends to bother me is that these Black churches are obviously located in Black communities, which are being adversely affected by this disease. But when you really get down and unearth it, you think about who are the main people who really support the Black church, and it's elder Black women. Elder Black women are the foundation of the Black church. And unfortunately, our elder Black folks are the ones who are really being acutely affected by this disease. So I think about who's more likely to attend church services today. It's elder Black women who have some of the conditions that will put them at risk for really experiencing the very, very serious symptoms of COVID. We got folks with diabetes, folks with heart disease. And if you already have those pre-existing conditions, COVID can really put you in the grave quick.
Exactly.
And it's like Black women's dedication to the church, I feel like is being exploited, because I'm gonna keep it 100 with y'all. I think this is a money grab. It's a money grab because older Black women, they're not sending their tithes through Venmo and PayPal. They actually drop it in the collection plate. They're not sending checks and money through the mail. And I really feel like this is about getting butts in seats so they can start putting that money back in the collection plate. That's all I really think this is. This isn't about if it was really about bringing the community back together, there's a way for you to be in service and do your ministry through distance. You can call people on the phone. Obviously, a lot of churches adjusted and they did Zoom sermons and, go-to meeting sermons. There's a way for you to be at service and in ministry without endangering the community. And I feel really some type of way that it's like you're endangering our Black elders because to me, it's a money grab. That's all it is. That's all it really comes down to. Follow the money.
Exactly.
And I just really I really do not appreciate that. As I'm a Black woman, hopefully, God willing, I'll live a long life and I'll be a Black elder woman. I really just don't appreciate how Black women, elder Black women, are really being exploited, because that's what it looks like to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think also it's two different things. It is definitely the idea that, ties go down during a time when there's no physical church. But I mean, there are certain churches like Axel Gospel who are not necessarily, unless they live in seriously paycheck to paycheck, which I do not believe with that big, location that they have, but they may be. I don't like to be in people's pockets. But you also have the component about influence. And we are seeing in the Black churches, we're already in a time where a lot of these older ministers are very, very threatened by younger ministers. And they're threatened by younger ministers because in their day and in their age, there was no theology school. There was no, at least there wasn't one that they could go to. They became ministers by their own profession of their faith and their calling with God, which is with any minister. But they did their own studies on their own. Now you're starting to see a lot of these young ministers who've gone to seminary school, who also have a particular type of status in the community. And a lot of these ministers, these older ones, they never had, professional degrees. They never had professional jobs. The only status that they had in the Black community, the only way you could get status in the Black community during their time was to be a minister, was to be in the pulpit, was to be somebody who they could look to. And I think the interesting thing that my sister pointed out to me is you could still have all of those things, but you and your ego does not allow you to see, and this is not even with just with minister, I'm dealing with this with a Democratic club right now. You are not able to see how you are able to have even more influence and more eyes on you in a virtual world. You physically need that pulpit to hold on to. And also, a lot of these ministers are very, very hung up on that word essential. I talked to a minister friend today and I asked him, I said, I'm trying to understand why they're so hung up on essential. Somebody once told me when we were doing a press release for San Francisco Pride, they said the press release makes the people that are at odds with you feel like they're small. And no one ever wants to feel like they are small. And that word essential and not being designated essential has made a lot of these ministers feel very, very small in a way that being a pastor made them feel very, very big. So now they're not essential and they don't have a congregation to complain about it every Sunday for them to look out to and feel big. And that's, that's a lot of what's going on.
I agree. That is a lot of what's going on. You have big egos, but one of the first things that I said was the same thing as Courtney. Even if Acts has the financial means to still be in operation, they need those tithes. And if you have a good amount of congregants who aren't technically literate or have access to technology, you're not getting that. And this is one of the reasons why I feel that churches that haven't progressed in embracing young people, like you said, young people, young ministers, women, and queer people aren't going to survive. Fortunately, I am able to be a part of a church. Like I said, it was the rule in my house that you had to attend church until you were 18 years old. So after I turned 18, I was like, I did my SpongeBob. I was like, I'm gonna head out. And I was out. I did not go to church for a couple of years. And it wasn't until actually an ex-teacher of mine whose daughter I was friends with, they invited me to Imani. And I was like, you know what? I like this church. And I started going on my own. And I've been going there since 1998. When I first started going there, I was not out. I actually attended church with a boyfriend that I was dating at the moment. But the church actually saw me transition. I had never felt uncomfortable. I've always been embraced. We have our assistant pastor is a woman. Also, our other assistant pastor is a out gay man. And I say all of that because, I don't know how much money and tithes they're getting, but we're still thriving together as a community, right? By holding virtual church and, being able to send in your tithes electronically. Unlike Bethel, where my mother still goes, that the last time I went there, it was very sad to see the empty amount of pews. So I know that you're not surviving during a pandemic when half of the people that you have, fall under the underlying conditions and don't have the access or know how to send in tithes. This should be a clear message that people need to move themselves aside. If it's about God, it ain't about you. If you're supposed to be the vessel of the message, you're not the Messiah. And also, we should not trust any congregation or church that is inviting anyone affiliated with the Trump Association to speak to our community. That is a clear message of what you're trying to do. The very administration that is out here to kill us, you're going to invite them to speak to us and talk about being a reformed homosexual. So furthermore, pushing your anti agenda on the Black gay community. So you're putting seniors in danger who have underlying conditions that are, more vulnerable to the disease, but you're also terrorizing Black queer people in these communities by saying that you're not even during a pandemic, you're still not wanted. You're still not seen as a person whose life has value. And I have a problem with that because I know people who still attend that church, and so I'm just like, what is in your psyche why are you following somebody who is this toxic, right? And completely a narcissist.
I mean, can we talk about how it's been completely established that quote unquote gay conversion therapy is high key abusive? First of all, it's not a thing. People are who they are, and that's that. And then how at the core of that is so anti-God, because God loves all and God created us all. So the fact that you would even bring someone, that to me, anyone who's an advocate of gay conversion therapy is an advocate of hate. And that's not who you invite to speak to your congregation. That's not anybody, unless you want to invite that person in to pray for them, to possibly explain to them and try to work with them around why their views are wrong and hateful and actually very anti-Christian and anti-God. If you want to do that, that's fine. But that obviously was not the goal and the case here. But
it's also a super political tactic, and we have to be conscious, and we have to remember when we're taking off of our Corona glasses and remember what the plan of the Trump administration is, at least going into this re-election as far as trying to gain more Black folks, more Blacks for Trump, right? And the way that you do that is that you appeal to those Black folks who only vote Democratic because Black folks vote Democratic. And who are those? Those are a lot of the respectable Negroes. And who are a lot of the respectable Negroes? I hate to say it. We do not all have, let me make sure I phrase it the right way. There are a lot of us who have very progressive grandparents and great uncles and great aunts, who either they were already progressive thinking or by being in relation to us, they've become more progressive. But a lot of older folks on the whole are sitting right on that bubble that basically makes them an easy, low-hanging fruit target for the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do you do that? You go into a community of older Black people, you convince them that the Democrats are keeping the churches closed as a political stunt, which is what I've seen a lot of Trumpers online talking about. This is a political stunt by the Democrats to try and make President Trump, I'm sorry, I can't believe I just said that, to make 45 look bad. And you convince them that 45 is the one who wanted to have their church, who they love more than anything else, open. And now you suddenly have a whole congregation who would vote Democrat, but Gavin Newsom and all the Democrats were the one that kept their church closed while 45 wants to keep it open. And suddenly now you have a whole church that's voting for 45.
And see, that's what I mean when I say, like, if people understood how easily this disease is spread, if they understood that we have not had the appropriate amount of testing to make sure that the people who, one, are ill are taken care of in their quarantine, but more importantly, the people who are asymptomatic have been recognized and they quarantine. Because the thing is, the people who are asymptomatic with COVID are that's the biggest danger for all of us. Because think about it, when you get sick, if you start showing symptoms of COVID or any type of cold, virus, flu, whatever, what's the first thing you're going to do? The majority of us, if we have the ability, we're going to stay inside. You're tired anyway, right? You're going to be at your house. You're not going to be out and about partying. You're not going to be out and about socializing. But when you're asymptomatic and you never develop any symptoms, you never feel bad, you never stop doing what you're doing. So then that's where the issue comes into. Like, if you're asymptomatic, you're still contagious, you can still spread the virus, and you're going all out and about. So that's what I'm saying. Like, if you understood that, if more people knew hey, we all need to get tested before we even jump back into things, because the people who are recognizably sick, they'll get treated, or they'll quarantine or isolate themselves on their own. But if we're asymptomatic and we're just going about the business, we're spreading it throughout the community, and then we might spread it to someone who has very severe reaction to contracting the virus, and then that's how we end up with a large amount of people being very severely ill or even dying. So it's like we have to educate ourselves, and then and to what you said, Carolyn, we and Chaney, would the Trump administration's goal as far as not just obviously trying to switch up and trying to kind of finesse the low-hanging fruit of voters. I feel like we as Black people, we understand in this country we are not a priority. We never have been, and for the foreseeable future never will be. But we don't have to do that to ourselves. We can respect the code, we can respect the game, where we know that we're living in a situation where we're not going to be prioritized economically, educationally, health-wise. We know that the Trump administration is not going to put our needs as a community first. But we don't have to do that to ourselves. We don't have to rush to open back up churches. We don't. We don't have to do that. We know that we're running the risk of spreading this disease throughout our community. So we can make it a point amongst one another to decide, hey, we can't control what they're doing, but we don't have to do this to ourselves. We don't have to disenfranchise one another with this. So I just don't get like why we know where we are, we know what type of administration we're living under, why we're not putting forth more effort to protect one another. That's what I'm struggling with.
Right. And Pastor Bob just allowing himself to be used as a tool anyway. Going back to both, but going back to what you both said, he has to get Biden's voters, right? Majority of the Black people that voted for Biden are the older church-going people who are like, oh yeah, Biden, he was with Obama, and so they still think that he's for Black folks. And by encouraging the reopening of church doors, he's speaking to a lot of those voters. And if you're putting, and let's not pretend that, Bob Jackson isn't the only clown that's allowing himself to be used by the Trump administration. Black pastors across the country, the difference between them, I don't know about the rest of them, but I do know that he's running for city council in my district, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that anybody, pastor or not, that is irresponsible by using their platform to send Black people into harm's way should not be on any Oakland, should not be occupying any type of Oakland seat at all.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
The voters who live in District 7 are people who attend these churches, right? And I don't believe that a lot of these people want to return back because they know, of the dangers. I feel that we also just need to somehow do some type of outreach to these, a more aggressive type of outreach to let people know about the dangers of COVID and public gatherings with multiple people and putting themselves into harm's way. But I don't believe that anyone, like I said, I don't care who you are, pastor, celebrity, if you are using your platform to put folks in harm's way, you're not for us. You're not for us. And I don't know if it could be done, but any church or religious institution that's opening their doors during this time should have their exemption revoked.
I think the very difficult, not difficult, the even bigger conversation we're talking about, of course, the electoral politics is we live in two cities. You all are there in Oakland, I'm here in Richmond, but we also had a pastor who did something similarly more towards the beginning of the pandemic, and people, I remember seeing the pictures of folks who all of the rest of the churches were closed and they all went to his church. And I sent the members of our home church, like, this is where y'all members went, and they about to try and bring the corona back to y'all church. But we all live in communities where Black folks, our numbers in the population have gone down so far. This is not like going to South Carolina where there's so many Black folks in the community, and where, of course, yes, it would devastate the community for one church to have a coronavirus outbreak. But I mean, we're talking about places where San Francisco has 2% of African Americans, and I don't even right now know what our percentages are in Richmond, but they're not that high. So all it takes is for one church, one major Black institution to really devastate the Black electorate, right? Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of Black leaders and Black electors, and of course we speak to all the people. Of course we are the leaders of all the people, but a lot of times your foundation, your base is your Black voters. What happens when all of them die off? And what happens when it's one of the leaders who's actually telling them to come into this space that actually, I mean, look at what happened in Detroit. My sister likes to talk about how what happened in Detroit happened before all the states went on full lockdown. That is true. But when you look at what happened, when you look at how many of the higher up leaders in the COGIC, passed, and a lot of them were tied to large events that happened, yes, Courtney, I will say again, before the complete lockdown. But that is an example of how all it takes is one church service, one event with just 200 people to decimate not just the congregation, but the leadership. I mean, if you cut off the leadership, you cut off the head, you really do devastate a group of people.
Yeah, there's been multiple deaths of COGIC pastors. I think last time I read it was like 30, if I'm not mistaken.
It was high, and it was kind of sad, and I don't know what's the opposite of poetic, but I mean, Bishop Sheard's mother died like maybe a week or two after the Clark Sisters movie came out, and that was after that whole family had been infected. I think Bishop Sheard, just type yes or no, either Courtney or Kalita. Bishop Sheard had it.
Bishop Sheard, the mother had it, and and a brother. But also not just Detroit, but the COGIC church, COGIC body in Louisiana as well. They had a very large meeting where some lady was coughing everywhere. So if we know about the ramifications, we're after all that. We're in the middle of the pandemic. We know all that already. Then why are we trying to do this again now that we know the problem?
Yeah, and I know for especially Oakland, like you were saying, Carolyn, we don't have the same percentage of Black people that some of these congregations, in the South do have. But I know, especially for East Oakland, a lot of these members, we live in neighborhoods that are being gentrified, and the government historically has used natural disasters to wipe out Black neighborhoods. Look how they did during Katrina, right? Leaving people literally for days to die. So why should they even care about a pandemic wiping out communities of Black people to where they can just continue and further taking housing away from us for redevelopment? So we have to, I believe, look at all of those areas of where we're trying to be played.
Yeah, and not to go down the conspiracy theorist rabbit hole, but
you all go down the conspiracy theorist rabbit hole, Courtney.
Deep East Oakland is the last. There's a few different layers there, because Deep East Oakland is the last place that is majority Black in Oakland. It's the last place where you could actually buy affordable, and I'm doing air quotes, quote unquote affordable homes, not just affordable rentals, but buy affordable homes. And it's, Chaney lives there now. She could tell you it's clear that they're coming for Deep East Oakland, that's the last frontier of the gentrification plan of Oakland. So I wouldn't be surprised that there's some deeper plans for letting this pandemic just ravage our senior community thus leaving a lot of possibly abandoned properties for people to come up and swipe up for pennies on the dollar. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's really something deeper going on and they're using the church, because we all know we're all Black. The church is, even though you're supposed to keep the church and state separate, the Black church has always been a point and a part of any type of organizing, both locally, state, and federally, when it comes to pushing legislation that's positive and beneficial to the Black community. So the church has always been at the forefront around organizing, and it still very, very much is. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some deeper strategy at work there, where you're luring people back to the Black church to possibly put them in a detrimental health situation.
Well, you think about this. Well, first of all, we've already seen that type of plan laid out by the planning commissioner in Antioch, who said basically let it ride out. So all the homeless, you can fix the homeless problem. You can fix the elder Social Security problem if you just let them all die. That's number one.
Yeah.
But number two, also you have to remember, you have a lot of Black churches, because of gentrification, that even if they do, whether they have a small congregation or a large congregation that comes into the doors, very few of them actually live still in that community, right? Like, okay, so our home church is right here on 43rd and Potrero in South Richmond. But my aunts that go to Pilgrim Rest live in Hercules, in Hilltop Green. There are people that come to Pilgrim Rest from Vallejo. There are people who come from Fairfield, from Suisun. Everybody who has moved out of the communities still comes back to their church. So what then happens? You have them come into the church, catch the corona, and then they take it out to whatever city that they are still living in, to whatever schools that they working in, and you're still, the likelihood that those same folks are still communing with Black folks in other cities is very, very high. So that means that, so if Reverend Landry, I'm gonna go call and say the name, if Reverend Landry here at Independent Holiness in Richmond is still having church, and he has a congregant who goes to Independent Holiness but still lives in Vallejo next to Tiffany Jones, hi Tiffany Jones, they are now taking this out. They now taking this out to Vallejo, and now Tiffany Jones and all the African American students that she's working with at her school are now in danger of being infected. So it has such a vast effect. It's not just even the small community that they are in. It reaches out into communities of Black folks in other areas.
And Tip Dog is not having it.
She's not having it. She's not.
I'm not having it at all. I will cut them. Absolutely, I will cut them.
You do have a good amount of congregants that work in the medical field. So, people go to church and, who are nurses, they're going back into these senior facilities. It's, it is, we just gotta stay away from large groups of people, y'all. We gotta continue.
But everybody going to graduation party this weekend, so I guess, it's all relative.
Oh, Lord.
If I see one more graduation, I didn't see graduation party videos. I have seen Mother's Day videos, and I have seen NFL draft videos, because, we Black folks, we got folks who are still being drafted.
I have seen the NFL draft videos.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen the NFL. I haven't seen any, I'm of course, I'm banned from Facebook at the moment, so I have seen one there.
Instagram. You ain't banned from Instagram.
I'm not banned from Instagram, but I haven't seen any of those videos. One of the things that I did want to talk about that also bothers me is, because Carolyn, you did see Pastor Bob's sermon, is also the separation between church and state, right? He literally was using the pulpit to talk about people voting him in for District 7.
Is he still doing that?
Yeah.
I'm sure he's still doing it, but we know you
call the FPPC.
He didn't kill that campaign. That campaign as soon as this happened. But he ain't gonna stop.
Call the FPPC.
And she's not on here anymore, but shout out to Treva Reed, who decided to join in on our Zoom today. She was looking forward to hearing you speak, Carolyn.
Aww. She didn't tell me that. Nobody ever tell me nothing.
but yeah, we have to look at some of the there's a few other people that are trying to run for District 7. We need to research everybody and see what they're trying to offer. But again, I think that we have to, of course, we can't go to people's homes, so we have to really speak to our elders. Like Courtney said, the elder Black women who are still actively getting out there and voting. Another thing that really irritated me about his sermon and trying to tell people to go back to church. I remember when my grandmother, when she wasn't able to go to church anymore due to her health declining, the church actually came to her, right?
Right.
And it would be, one deacon, one or two deacons that
give her communion on first Sunday.
Right, exactly. That would bring her communion and all of that. Now, if they really wanted to outreach to seniors, just like how East Oakland Collective has been out here gathering resources and supplies and taking them to people with compromised systems and elderly people, why aren't y'all doing that? This nigga, this nigga up here bragging about giving people $40 and some groceries, right?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. Number one, I don't know if that was the event that he's been promoting, and then the person who I talked to today said it didn't really turn out the way that he thought it would because the word got out about people pushing back. I don't know who all the pastors were who collectively pushed back, but I heard that there was a collective of pastors that were like, yeah, no, don't do this, and so a lot less people went. And I think that I would not be surprised if they are still doing that senior outreach as they should. I mean, a church of that magnitude probably is. I think it was definitely a case of him using his pulpit as a bully pulpit. The separation of church and state has always been very subjective. I guess is a very generous way of saying it because, I'll reach again to Courtney and to Tiffany Jones. We know that one of the first things that they ask you when you start building up who are going to be your voters, they start asking you, are you connected with any place of worship? Like the church is very, very active in electoral politics, much more than its tax status says that it is. I mean, The first place I saw Shirley Chisholm speak was at Pilgrim Rest, and you could not win an election during that time, during the 90s, and even going into the 2000s, you could not win an election in Richmond if you did not visit Pilgrim Rest. It was just a given fact. But I think, and for a long time, pastors and ministers, they did have the opportunity. Like I said, my great uncle was a pastor and a councilman. That did give you a great opportunity to reach a lot of people. You were already a person of influence, and what that kind of looked like is, so we'll take Paw. That's my great uncle. We'll take him as an example. Okay, you are a person of great influence in this city amongst African American people. If I'm a white person, we know how white people do. They want to look and see who is the most influential Black. If I'm gonna vote for a Black, if I'm gonna vote for a person, I'm gonna vote for this one because everybody else like him. I'm gonna vote for that one. So being a pastor already gave you that influence. I think one thing the church has never really appropriately grappled with, especially in the era of 45, is pastors have always been kind of on that being for the people. I'm currently reading this book and they're talking about Jesse Jackson's election in 84 and 88. The pastors were always of the people and speaking to the issues of the people. This is kind of a new generation of older, respectable Negro pastors, not new generation, but their views are different than the people now. And I think it was Tiffany Jones who said that in the chat. The respectable Naker view is different than the people now. It didn't used to be, it very much is now. And we have not grappled with the fact that these new pastors are going up and actually aligning themselves with people who are against our interests and who are putting themselves at odds with some of the other larger pastors. I mean, T.D. Jakes came out publicly at the beginning of the pandemic and told pastors not to open their churches. So, yeah.
I really do agree with you both when you say that it's really ego driven, because you get to put on a show and people don't want to feel small and they feel threatened because this whole pandemic situation has really unearthed how, and I had said, I made a post about this on Facebook, how people honestly just don't give a fuck about people. And if we're going to survive this, we have to learn to give a fuck about one another, because it's not this me, and I, all this very selfish driven behavior. It's selfish to open up a church and to and try to encourage people to gather. And people talk about, oh, you can do social distancing, blah blah, but honestly, social distancing is a practice. It's not a cure. We do not have a cure. We don't have any treatments. And like I said, because the people who are going to more than likely show up, which is going to be elder Black folks, elder Black women, people who possibly more than likely have pre-existing conditions that put them at adverse risk to experiencing the very severe symptoms around COVID. And when you know that, you know that he knows who's going to show up, he knows who's the backbone of his church community. That's just fucking selfish. It's selfish to need to have church in person so bad you're willing to threaten people's lives. Find something else to do. Find something else to do. If it was truly about being at service and being at a position where you can give people peace, possibly some financial assistance, if it was truly about that, you would find ways to do it in a safe way. Because there are ways to do it in a safe way. Like you said, Carolyn, if you really wanted to reach out, and Chaney, you have a great example with your grandmother. If you really wanted to be at service, you'd call people on the phone. You'd pray with people on the phone. You'd give sermons, either you could call in and do a prayer line. You could do stuff, possibly, find a way to connect with one of the local television stations and be on TV. There's ways for you to connect with people, and God is everywhere. So God is always with us. So you don't have to be in a physical church to receive the word and to feel his peace. So I don't understand this. I really don't.
Right. But back in the day,
the problem with is that a lot of these, and it goes back again to the young church versus the old church. A lot of the young churches were already doing all of those things. Mm-hmm. So they were already having online service. They were already having prayer lines where people could either call in. They already had dedicated prayer emails where you could email the pastor and he would either call you back or he would make, they already have their virtual tithe set up. So the people, like at my church, even when I go to church, I'm still sending my tithes via Cash App. They already had all the things. A lot of these older churches, and it goes back to what Chaney said, and I've been saying this since the beginning of the pandemic. I told my aunts this because they are trustees at Pilgrim Rest. I said, churches who go back to only physical presences will not survive in the post-Rona world. This should not be something that and I said this to Pride as we're getting ready for virtual Pride. I say this to any organization, really. Whatever it is that you are doing for your Corona pivot, you need to keep it. So this week when in DeRitter, when they had the graduation parade, keep it. For virtual Pride, I've already told them my goal, I'm only going to be president maybe one more year, but in 50 years, we should still see that virtual Pride is there. Keep it. Whatever you're doing, and keep it. A lot of these organizations didn't have the infrastructure to pivot. I mean, I've seen church online services where it was somebody pointing the camera at the organist. Why are we looking at the organist? Because they didn't have a virtual ministry.
Right.
So you're going to see a lot of people, just like a lot of businesses. I think I was reading today, specialty breads in San Francisco, whatever, is closing permanently. Just like you're seeing a lot of businesses closing, you're going to see a lot of churches closing. And it's going to be sad for a couple of reasons. Some of these churches, like Chaney mentioned, their congregation had already dwindled to sad numbers. I'll be honest, I get sad every time I go to Pilgrim Rest. Pilgrim Rest used to be like the most cracking church in Richmond.
It's hella sad.
The church independent where he had the people come despite Corona, they used to be like you would go to independent and they would be shouting for an hour. like Courtney told me that the musicians would leave Pilgrim Rest during the sermon and go to Independent. Now they got like 10 people in their congregation. Some of these people are doing this as a last minute grab because their churches are already dying. And I'm gonna say this, and it's gonna probably offend some I don't know if we have any non-Black people on here, but in Richmond, in a place where you're seeing the brown population grow and the Black population dwindle, what you've already seen before Corona was some of these non-Black churches approaching these Black churches to try and get their buildings.
Yep.
Like at least actually, let me stop naming names. At least, yes, they've already been approached to just go ahead and give us the building. You don't have a congregation anymore, just give us the building. And it's going to become a situation where they can't afford their building. And it's not, the way that gentrification is not all about white people coming in and taking over Black communities. It's really about the erasure of Black people in communities, whoever it is that does it. And you're going to see a lot of that in this post-Corona world. And it's going to be sad with the Black church because a lot of them, the mainstays and cornerstones of our community are not going to survive it.
They're not. And you already saw I have witnessed a few churches that were renting their church. So they would have service during a certain time. And then after that service, the second service would be of a non-Black congregation. But to add on what you said about that, we're already seeing new churches being built that are not Black churches. On Instagram, I'm seeing ads for all types of new white churches.
What?
Yeah.
They call them startup churches. They got one in Oakland.
Yeah.
What's a startup church?
And they're pastors that are moving here from other states, opening up for the gentrified community, for the people work in tech. They go to church too. They just don't want to go to church with us. But it is sad because the very last time I attended Bethel as a child, you had to get there on time or else you wasn't going to get a seat. And, and the church has an upstairs also. When I tell you that it was less than 40 people in there, and so you only have the elders left, and we need these people to survive, right? Because as more people die off, they're losing the people who actually consistently tithe for real, right?
But then that's kind of like my point where it's like you're endangering the foundation, the backbone of your church community by trying to open back up. Because if one of them gets COVID, or 20% of them pass on because of COVID, because that the percentages of who when elders get COVID now between 65 and 75 years old is about 5%. From 75 to 80, it jumps up to 10 to 15%. So we're talking about if you got elders between the age of 65 and 85, and some of them get COVID, we talking about a good amount of them might pass on from this virus. So you're not doing yourself, you think you're doing yourself a favor by opening up and getting that money flowing back in. But if they contract the virus and they pass on, that money is gone forever. Check that out. So you need to think about how you are possibly being detrimental to your congregation for the long run. So you got to they're not even thinking about it because they so focused on the right now. You got to look down the line because it don't take but a second to get COVID. And the people who die from COVID-19, they die within a month of getting it. That's quick. That's quick to get something and then in a month, and that's on the long end. People have died within a week of getting COVID because of the adverse reaction, especially you got people who might have compromised lungs or definitely heart disease, anything where it's going to be a struggle to get oxygen to your organs, they're going to go quick. They really going to go quick. So they're not even thinking about for the long term. They just so worried about getting that money right now. And that's not going to work.
And he's not worried about anything else right now except his ego in trying to get this seat. You have this huge church that is located in the area where you have a huge homeless population, right? And let's not even talk about the amount, going back to what Courtney said about how Black women, elder Black women, will be the ones who will go back to church first. You have a good amount that also are still taking care of people at home, right? Grandchildren, people that still are living with elders. And in Oakland, what, over 70% of the homeless population is Black, and then Courtney, correct me if I'm wrong, it's what, of that population, about 60% are Black, or I don't know the percentage of Black men, but I know
majority of the majority of the homeless population in Oakland is Black people. 60 out of the total homeless population, 40% are Black men. So we're and that adds to a whole other aspect of people who are more susceptible to getting COVID, because obviously living on the street does not do anything for your health. So folks who are experiencing homelessness already usually have some serious health situations, just because living on the street and under those conditions is detrimental to health. So that's a whole other bag of worms right there. And also people who are living in shelters cannot properly isolate and quarantine. And so I'm surprised there's not more data. We have the data on how it's spreading quickly through our senior living facilities, but I'm surprised there's not more data coming out about how it's spreading through homeless shelters as well.
Right, homeless shelters. And I brought that up because, and yes, Tonya, I'm sorry, if folks want to comment, please. There's some, great folks who are in this thread that can offer some great comment. But I bring that up because we count the homeless people that's living on the street, but houseless people are also sleeping on couches, floors, and couch surfing, right? And we all know that everybody used to live with my grandma, right? If you didn't have a home, you always went over to grandma's house, and so we have people who are still out here not practicing social distancing, going back to elders' homes, and elders being encouraged to go to church. And then coming back home and further spreading. And so it's not just about affecting congregants, but it's our entire community that's right here. And I'll open it up for Tonya. Tonya wanted to chime in as well. What's up, girl?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting us to this great this needed conversation, and allowing us to chime in. I had a question and a comment. I wasn't able to watch the press conference with Bishop Bob and whoever, and I told Chaney, that from what I've been hearing, in the comments, that one, it's problematic that he's asking for this. Two, it's problematic who he's partnering with to do this work. I heard that whoever one of the people was, highly homophobic and all this lovely stuff. My question is did he actually say the real a good reason as to why they need to be exempt from shelter in place? Because my church, I was hearing you guys talking about how there's some churches that have lost membership in the past, and my church is one of those. It's really small. We only have, I could count maybe 30 people that show up on a regular basis. But for some reason, my pastor was able to adapt. We set up like Zoom meetings. He still wants to go to church, so he goes to the church and he preaches from the pulpit and he has his laptop right in front of him so we can all see him in the Zoom meeting preaching. And we've been able to adapt, and we've been able to have set up so people can donate online, or, you know, if they feel the need to drop by the church, they you know, drive by and put it in the mailbox. So I'm trying to understand, Bishop Bob, is he not able to adapt in that kind of way? Does he not have access to technology? And
He
if
just
that's,
doesn't want to.
yeah, he doesn't want to, because I'm trying to come up with like a solution. Like, I'm sure maybe
I think it's a two-part thing. It's one, if he has access, does his congregation have access?
right. So is there
If you have an older congregation, we're on Zoom. I use Zoom 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day, right? But
right.
older people, they don't know how to do all of this stuff. They might not trust. They might not even have their money in banks or who knows what, right? Like,
So
it's just
my
not
question,
easy to navigate.
yeah, my question is, I mean, my church too, I mean, most of the members actually are older. And so the question is whether or not we as a community can provide our elders with the technical assistance to help them be able to engage with their church, if that's a huge problem. Because maybe it's not about, well, yeah, I think for him, I think it's like, it's political. I think it's more political rather than actually wanting to serve his constituents. But there are some churches that probably are struggling, and if there's a way that we can help them and support them in that, they be less inclined to follow Bishop Bob's lead. That's
Yeah,
all.
I think your
I
question
think,
kind of
Tanya, I think part of it too is, I think people, when you listen to what people are actually saying, you can then determine, it's clear to determine where their motivations are coming from. Because like I said, if it was really about wanting to be in service to your community, they would actually find ways to navigate around that. And I know that can be, not saying that that's not a struggle, but you would say something like, I can't reach my congregation the way they need me to reach them. There will be some type of context clues and whatever they're saying that would determine, you'd be able to determine that. Saying that, you know, you need to follow me, and it being really focused on him wanting to be in front of a crowd instead of doing things virtually, it's really clear. And then I think for the pastors of the past, people who were, when we first were doing shelter in place, who were really upset about it, the motivations were just blatantly clear that it was about them wanting to just not follow directions, them not wanting to be told what to do and how to run their churches. It wasn't that they were necessarily worried that they weren't going to be able to be in service. It was just about, they didn't like being told what to do. Like Carolyn had mentioned earlier, it was about them feeling shaded and slighted about not being an essential business.
Mhm.
It was really very much ego driven. And I do understand how some churches are concerned that, you know, they're not in service, and people do need, you know, like I said, I'm not a church goer on a regular basis, but I understand the comfort and the community that having your church family with you during these trying times is really important for a lot of people's mental health. And I do recognize that. But if that was truly the case, that would be communicated. You'd be able to hear that and what their pleas would be. And I have not heard that really from anybody.
I think there's three different layers of the question, because there is the community access component. There is definitely still the political and egotistical component. There is also, for me, the biblical component. So the issue with community access and the issue with helping elders pivot is very important. I was literally completely outside of this conversation thinking about that with one of the Democratic clubs that I'm working with, because I'm in charge of the newsletter now, and a big part of being in charge of the newsletter is sending it out, getting it ready and sending it out via mail. Why? Because so many of the club members are older and don't have emails and don't have, no one to help them get on Zoom and all the things. And I'm sitting here as a 41-year-old, just angry that I have to do this. But it's a real thing, and I think that you're right, Tanya. It's something that we need to figure out how to help our elders with, because I don't believe this world is not going backwards. This world is going fully digital at some point. It is definitely the political and the egotistical, component. I think the best thing that we can do is, like Chaney said, is try to educate our elders in the best way that we can, and try and get them to understand the very detrimental and negative impacts. Get them to understand why they can sympathize with the intent, because that's what's going to be the sticking point for them. For them, the sticking point politically is going to be, well, you don't understand. To me, the church is essential. That's what's going to be the sticking point for them politically. And that is what people like Bob Jones are really hedging their bets on, is that an older person is saying, for me, church is essential. And one thing that my sister said, which really pretty much hits home the point, which is something we've been trying to tell these ministers, because a lot of them were very resistant when Corona first happened. They didn't understand why they had to go on Zoom or why they had to do Facebook Live. And it's something that I've been saying with Pride as we're going to virtual Pride. The church is not the building. The building is not essential. The church is the people. And if you've been saying that for 50 years and you believe the people are the church, then you don't have a problem with the building itself being closed. The building is not essential. Take that into a greater realm. The building is not essential. Forget Corona. The building is not essential, right?
Amen. I'm sorry.
Older people.
You are preaching right now.
That is
Yes.
hard.
So true.
That's hard. So it's a lot of those things. And that community access, I don't really know what the answer to that is, but I know that as those of us who are on the call that are in the political realm, it's something we're going to have to figure out, because a lot of these older folks, this digital thing is really hurting them more than they will even admit.
Listen, I have been, you can ask Demetria who's on this call. I have been trying to encourage my parents to learn their devices for about 4 years, especially after Trump, especially after that asshole got, put into office, because I seen where, I didn't see that we were going towards a pandemic, but I was like, look, this is all that we're going to have to rely on. But also I understand that we're going to have to meet some of our seniors where they are. We have people who are dealing with, dementia and other types of elements to where they just can't grasp technology. And going back to my grandmother, her spirit's been strong with me during this pandemic, and I'm really grateful for that. Like Courtney said earlier, I remember when my grandmother, she would go to church, but Sunday was dedicated to God the whole day. So you had, Bible study that started like around 8 a.m. or earlier, then church right after. You don't get out of church till 3, you got some time to eat. Then my grandmother, she'd sit up and listen to the religious hour, right? And I'm like, we done went to church and did all this. Now you're going to sit up and listen to another sermon on the radio? So some of these churches are going to have to meet their congregants where they are, because we cannot open the doors just yet, or if at all. Linking up with radio stations, right? Like Tonya was saying, I don't have the bandwidth or energy, so I'm not going to say that I'm going to do anything, but there definitely needs to be a group of folks, who can, maybe Davey D or Kat from KPFA. How can we get a religious hour on the radio?
Which I know Melora is in the chat. I saw Melora. They have a religious hour, and this is a great time for us to support radio stations like KPOO, radio stations. I don't know if KBYA is still around. I think it is. I feel like I've seen their images, but there is a lot of church radio that we don't, honestly, here in the Bay Area, and we used to. Remember, KBLX used to have a gospel hour in the morning on the weekdays, and then KDIA would be all during the time, and then it turned into the light. We used to have great access to gospel radio. We do not anymore. And I had started to listen to Brother Marlon, but he's a syndicated radio station or radio show out of the South. The South, they got really in the end, what we're talking a lot about is the way that the Black community in California and in Western states has completely broken down. And we're seeing that with our Black church, because the Black church, of course, used to be the backbone. But our Black community is so broken down that we don't have the infrastructure to get to our elders anymore, period.
Right. And so that's why I say meeting people where they are. Everyone isn't going to be able to use technology. Even if you have a smartphone, you might not have the internet, or your smartphone might not be compatible for Zoom and different things. So in gospel hours, but I'm talking about actual radio shows where people were preaching, right? They had like maybe some gospel music, but the gospel hour was actually dedicated to a sermon that people could listen to. Like you stated, newsletters. I've had to do that in the past in communicating with certain clients who they're like, because there's still a good amount of elder Black people who just don't want to use technology. They don't believe in it. I don't want my information all out there like that.
Oh yeah.
Don't put me on the Facebook.
Don't put this on Facebook.
On the Facebook.
You're right, the Facebook.
And so there is still a resistance to technology for certain elders. So in just trying to answer your question, Tonya, I think there has to be both. There has to be, I know Imani does offer Zoom course to some people who might not know how to use it. And I also believe that we're going to have to do some type of different outreach to the people who are just resistant and technically challenged.
Can I touch on something? Carolyn, you touched on something by saying the Black community, we are so broken down. And I know you mean as far as like away from one another, where we can't reach our elders. I just want to point out that is by design. That is also one of the other effects of gentrification. It's about not just people getting scattered, but once you scatter up people, it is then even harder to communicate and to organize. And that's communicate and to organize around anything. It's harder to organize politically. It's harder to organize now. We are in this pandemic situation where we can't do the proper outreach to our elders around safety protocols. So that is by design, that we are all now dispersed and we can't reach each other in a real way to protect one another from these outside forces.
And it's always been like that since we were brought here, right? Taking religions, family, all of that, which is why it's important for us to find ways to still be connected. I want to open it up to other people on the Zoom who might want to add something. I see, we still have Tonya here, Tiffany, Melora, Demetria, Deja. Anybody want to add something before we hop off? I'm gonna hop off at 2:45. And I'll go ahead and make sure you unmute yourself because everybody's on mute.
Hi, y'all. This is Carolyn's little sister she keeps referencing.
Hey, Courtney.
Not only am I part of the LGBT community, I'm also a minister and heavily connected with several churches and heavily in the church. And I think the biggest problem really is not only just egocentric, but we definitely have taken the face off of God, and that we're there for simply just God and to serve the people. And if we look at biblically, who takes care of the widows and the elders are the deacons. We're not stopping from doing their job. We're not stopping the church, the deacons from going to check on the widows and the elders. We're not stopping that. We're just stopping your building from being open to 200 or even 10 people. And as a body of believers who know the stories of pestilence and famines, we should understand that that's a problem and know that if we have a means to cut down that and protect God's people, then we should be able to do that peacefully. And clearly that's a problem. My mom teaches Sunday school every Sunday, and she's been doing that for the past, I'm 38. She usually has one student in her class. Every week since the pandemic, she's had at least 100 viewers. So clearly you can get the views up. You're reaching the gospel more right now than you ever are before. And that's the point of the gospel. We're not here to serve ourselves. And if this is a political move, then that's a problem. Because I heard that part of his sermon this morning was to touch not the man of God, to speak about the man of God. So you're using your position in the community as a minister of the gospel to promote yourself politically. And that's an all-around problem. And that'll never get us anywhere. That's
and
all.
If I can just respond to my own sister, it's a couple of things in that. So we're talking about my mom. Yes, my mama does do Sunday school every Sunday, and I shared on my page, and Courtney tagged me, so I encourage all of y'all to pay attention. And one of the things about that is kind of to Tanya's point and to Chaney's point about, listening to preachers. My mama, every morning when we used to wake up, she was listening to preachers all day long. Some of them are no longer her favorites because they became openly, homophobic, but that's another subject. A lot of these preachers who are not able to make this pivot, they're not able to do it because they are not theologically sound. And if you're not theologically sound, then you depend on the theatrics of the pulpit in order to make you a great preacher. So if you don't have the theological background, if you don't really actually have the word, if you never critically broke it down, you can't prove yourself as a good minister because you don't have, Rev used to always say all of your messages should always end at the cross, which is great. But if you can't really biblically teach people and take them to the cross without yelling about the cross, then you have a problem. Then that's one thing. And then to the other Courtney's point about being a conspiracy theorist, I'm a biblical conspiracy theorist who read the Left Behind series many, many decades ago, or at least a decade ago. The Left Behind series is about the rise of the Antichrist. My mom always like to say that Donald Trump is not necessarily the Antichrist because biblically we wouldn't be here. But at the same time, a lot of the tactics that you see laid out in Revelations, laid out in revelatory fictional stories like Left Behind really goes to the way that Donald Trump actually is building up his base in the Black community. And not even just the Black community, not even just the Black church, with so many of these different leaders. So I think we all need to really watch the way that he gathers the people who are not on his side, who suddenly become on his side. You need to actually watch the way that is done, because for me, that is very, very biblical. And people will tell you, I talk about that on Facebook all the time. I'll just randomly drop stuff from Left Behind because I have very specific thoughts on, how this thing is playing out biblically.
I have to write the name of that book down.
Now, Left Behind has left me traumatized and scared, so you can't be scared. I've been traumatized.
Good
a movie too, wasn't it? A movie.
It was a movie, and I tell you, it has really left me traumatized. When I was little, but when you grew up in the Black church, you always scared of the tribulation. And I remember one time I just heard this big dong. I was like, what? I said, oh no. My rule is if I call my mama and she answered the phone, which she might not. If I call my mama and she's still alive, then I didn't miss the tribulation. But I be scared sometimes because it's a crazy world.
Yo, and one thing Demetria said, she's like, her grandmother always had her radio. My grandma always had her radio by her also. Like,
yep.
If it wasn't on church, she had it on baseball.
But we need the ministers that tell the truth. I like one of my favorite bishops who used to be very anti-LGBTQ is Bishop Carlton Pearson. But the thing that actually changed his life theologically was his interactions with our own Reverend Yvette Flunder. It was really her pushing back against him for so many years until he received a revelatory word. And the person who actually supported him in that revelatory word was Yvette Flunder. And it was basically I've been telling you this. It takes for a lot of the affirming ministers, a lot of the progressive ministers, just like we say with, quote unquote, I don't want to say good police, but okay, whatever. It takes people to actually continue to speak and continue to speak out against, continue to try and educate their peers, because otherwise there won't be a change. You won't see a progressive word going forward.
And Demetria, what were you about to say?
I wasn't saying nothing. I was saying my grandmother had hers on baseball if it wasn't on some old thing too.
Well, before we close out, one of the things that I wanted to say that was talk about, that was another hypocritical comment from Pastor Bob. He said, we're supposed to work together to love God. Whatever.
Oh, okay.
What about us working together to stay alive, right? Working together
Right.
to keep, your neighbor alive, the people that you care about.
They told him to say that shit. You can tell with somebody that's told what they told you. What that person told you to get you on their side. You can always tell. Always tell.
Yo, this is Melora. I just, and I left this in the comments, but I have to say this. I really appreciate this dialogue. I really appreciate hearing y'all's voices. Everything we hear is from a white vocal cord. And to hear stories that, or subject matters that are so relatable, there's a whole group of people that need to hear this conversation. You know what I mean? And more. I didn't know what to expect when I dialed in, and I feel just really charged to just say that I want to support in any way that I can. And looking at just how to make sure that we are responsible for our news. And I feel like I just watched the news, from people that I can trust, from people that I know have their boots to the ground, and that if it ain't facts, it's definitely on a moral compass that we can all have a conversation, agree or disagree, throw things at the gumbo to see what adds to the flavor. And so I hope y'all keep this up. I don't know if you've communicated that you're going to do that or not, but I hope y'all keep this up. And Melanie and I have said both of y'all's names separately about something like this. So to see both of y'all just be doing this shit together. I know we talking about church, sorry if that offends anybody, but to see y'all doing this together.
I'm back with Melora, so that means that I cuss, and I also have, well, not in Corona, we're not gonna talk about sex. I'm back.
Hell yeah, I so relate to that. I mean, I've been Kojic, Baptist, non-denominational, African non-denominational. Now I'm just like, I am God. There it is.
Amen.
I think we can all count on Chaney and Carolyn to always have something to say.
Hell yeah. Hell, but ain't no bullshit though. It's like some real, it's like what you feeling. Like this is the stuff we need to be talking about.
Especially when it comes to, our religious spaces. We've been denied access, and I'm talking about Black queer people for so long that one of the reasons why I do stay vocal about, going to church, because most folks don't know that there's spaces. Throughout the years, just like I was invited to Imani, I've invited numerous friends who have ended up becoming members and who are more active than I am. And the thing is that it's not that gay people don't want to go to church or we don't like God. We just want to be in spaces that are safe, that are safe, where I can still have my own Black church experience without the shame, right?
Yes.
And the toxic environment that comes along with it. There are spaces that exist like that. And I think that we need to be more vocal in sharing about those spaces, because there's too many churches like Acts, unfortunately, like Bethel, and I don't dislike those institutions, right? I dislike the toxic Christianity that they represent, right?
Yeah.
That,
And for when I first came out, I stopped going to church for a while because I was going to a what was then a budding mega church, which then became a very well-known church because they are on television. I helped them build their youth department. But at that time, I was expected to hide who I was while building that youth department. And it wasn't until somebody introduced me to Spiritual Truths in Long Beach, which actually was one of the many churches headed by Carl Bean, who was an out Black minister, one of the first out Black bishops in the nation. But when I came back to the Bay Area, I really started navigating back towards traditional Black churches. And just everybody on here knows me. Y'all know that I'm churchy for no reason. It's a I need a little bit more when I go to but also being raised in Louisiana, I just kind of had this opinion that, I've been in church all my life. Raised by a mama who was a serious preacher, not preacher of the gospel, but a very serious teacher of the word of God. And you can't keep me in church, from since I'm a baby and tell me that God loves me no matter what, and then tell me suddenly that he doesn't. So I'm the person who went to our church's 100th anniversary, all butched up. So excited to meet Dorinda Clark Cole, who was my very first crush at 5 years old, even though I did not know it. And yes, I did jump over my 75-year-old auntie just to give Dorinda a hug and a kiss. She was confused.
Oh my God.
And that's just how I live my life when it comes to church. And I've had to call out my own cousin for speaking homophobic shit in the pulpit. He didn't like it, but it was what it was.
Come on.
And what I don't like as a straight person, as a straight Black person, to me, you're anti-Black if you think that you're gonna get up into a pulpit and start preaching homophobia against Black people. You need to. We as a Black community have to protect one another. So what do I look like further ostracizing my queer brothers and sisters, knowing what we have to face as Black people, what Black queer people have to face out here in society? Why would I then turn around and then ostracize them further? Especially we talking about in the Black church, which is supposed to be the center of love and a place for people to come and commune with one another and be at one with the Lord. Like, you're being anti-Black first and foremost. And us doing that to one another, like I had said before, we don't have to be like that amongst ourselves. We supposed to protect and love one another first and foremost. So I can't control what the Trump administration is doing. I can't control what white people do, but I, as a Black person, can control how I treat my brothers and sisters. So I just wanted to say that.
Right. And also not just churches being safe for Black, queer, and trans people, but being safe for women, right? You have, I remember even when I was a little kid, I didn't understand why all the men sitting at the head, all the people sitting at the head of the church are all old men. All of them. Every single one. And so I wanted to also go to a church that just wasn't safe for queer people, but safe for women, and having women in spaces of leadership, right? And churches where you can actually confide, with your pastor. I've had personal meetings with my pastor when I was going through personal dilemmas. Shoot, I even called it once when I was going through a breakup with an ex-girlfriend, right? and not knowing what to do. But that's what a community, your church is your community, it's your family. And I feel, I feel at home. Demetria's been with me there numerous times. She actually know most of the people that go there, and so just having a space where I could have, a family. I remember years ago, I was on hard times. I was still able to get food from my church. How many, especially Black trans people, would just be even more whole knowing that they could go to their church to get some food, right? Or some financial assistance, or just some guidance, or a word of, encouragement. It's so much needed, even more right now, as people are sitting in isolation, and in despair at the moment. But yeah, I guess we could, if anybody had anything else to say, if not, go ahead. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna just kind of say that the church being your family is the whole reason why I really am concerned about Bishop Bob's, statement, because when I think it's all kind of linked together. If you have a leader who's willing to ignore parts of the Bible and get on the pulpit and castigate Christians who are LGBTQ or women or whoever, ignoring that essential tenet of Christianity is to love one another regardless, no matter what. If they're willing to ignore those parts of the Bible talking about loving one another and being in community with one another and being family with one another, then that just tells you their motivation is all off in the first place. They don't see their members as family if they don't care if they're putting their family at risk or at harm. They don't care that they're hurting one another, their members. That's not a family atmosphere. It's a business transaction. It's a performance. It's whatever. It's not what being a true Christian or a true person of God who loves and cares for their members and wants the best for their members, even if they have to explore different ways of sharing the word or whatnot. That should be what you care about, not the fact that you're not in front of them. And I really think it's probably financial more than anything, that they're not getting the money that they used to get. And then, so I think it really, those people who feel that they should do against the health and the welfare of their community, of their church, their motivation is questioned and flawed. And I feel really concerned for members of that church, because I don't think they're getting the love and the support and the ministry that they deserve, that they should be getting. And so that's my thought. And it's probably redundant. You guys have probably already said it before, but I just had to get it out there because it's really concerning to me. But I thank you guys for offering this, opportunity to share and talk. And I'm definitely will tune in to future conversations.
It's definitely concerning. Demetria wanted to add something, but it is for sure concerning, Tonya, because it's not just the congregation, it's the community, right? Because people who congregate there also live in the community, but do you even care about the outside community? Language is very important. And one of the things that I heard him say was, we're giving out $40 and we're giving out food. Although $40 isn't a lot, at least we're not passing out drugs and alcohol, which was a shade to the harm reduction that San Francisco is trying to do, right? Because the hotels that's being occupied, they're giving free alcohol, cannabis, and drugs to the people that are there. That's shaming people. I'm gonna let Demetria go ahead and add what she wanted to say.
Well, I just wanted to say, we have a real church because we running over time now, right?
Hallelujah.
This gonna be talked about for a minute. We done went over time now.
Look, this is the part where in 2 minutes I got to go because I got beans on the stove.
Okay. Oh my God.
I just wanted to add
preached
that I feel like, and take all of this with a grain of salt. With my dad is a pastor, with also, I'm a Black queer woman, but at the same time, I felt like so much of my journey was about finding a place that was safe for me. Where is this safe for me to be? Where is it safe for my loved ones to be? And so on and so forth. And the places that even seemed idyllic and idyllically safe, at some point I've experienced harm. And it has been a part of my journey for quite some time. So when I have a son, you know, and I'm raising my child, I'm very hypersensitive and aware of what environments I allow him to participate in and or be committed to and or be subjected to. So I said all of that to say that I feel like there's always a lot of emphasis. I feel like I have a very traditional journey, which is I came up, I experience harm, I don't feel safe, I take a step back, and then I do the work to undo the harm, and then I re-enter into finding places that are safe for me. And now, especially in this conversation, I see it about more than just this personal experience, but in about how the way we use our voices and in the way that we use our presence and our participation to really kind of be lifting up these things that don't serve us. So for example, it doesn't serve us to say, yeah, we just gonna re-enter the church because they can't tell us what to do. We have to lift that up. We have to expose that. And all of the narratives around that, and that's occurring. Like when Tanya was saying about, well, we have to teach the elders how to use technology and blah, blah, blah. So changing those things and moving into that dialogue in this conversation, I'm seeing that as just as important as my own personal journey to find my own safe place or the conditions that I'm looking for. And I feel like it's really tricky because, again, when you were just saying that, well, if the tenet is to love the people that you shepherd, and you're saying, you know, how are you loving them if you're opening your church and creating a place of love? Then I could imagine the response being, oh, it's because I love you that I'm opening a church, right? It's because I love you that I'm not answering to man, I'm answering to God, I'm creating, right? And so there has to be this twofold where we are in fact supporting our elders and where we are building out other ways to say, hey, you can still stay connected and there are other options. It doesn't have to look like it's always looked. And then there has to be some way where we're also just like raising up and building up new thinking and new ways to connect with the God in us, to be honest, because there's some way that we have to just be responsible with how this old baton is being passed, and that we can minimize the undoing to start the actual doing and building. And Pastor Carolyn said we ain't got that much time because left behind is coming, it's happening, right? But just seeing it more in a responsibility towards, we don't have to react to just what Pastor Bob says, right? We have the option and the opportunity to kind of lift and build out the things that need to be put in place to undo a lot of these narratives that put us in this place.
And if I can add on to what Demetria just said, kind of, you know, we've talked about a lot of macro ideas and thoughts around church, but I want to kind of zoom in specifically on Axville Gospel for a couple of reasons. We already talked about how Bishop Bob is running for office. We can't let this become the new council member of District 7. But I personally think he's already killed his campaign. But we also have to make sure that we're staying in the community and supporting our candidates, wink and nod, that are in that fight. Because if he has a Trump supporting organization behind him, that means he's going to have the money that he's raised to run that campaign.
Yep.
So regardless of my opinion that he's killed his campaign with this, you know, we know, those of us that do electoral politics, if you get the money to run the campaign, you have a very high chance of winning. That's number one. Number two, I mentioned Bishop Carlton Pearson. And if you look at what happened to Bishop Carlton Pearson, you know, he was the top televangelists of the time. We all have, those of us who grew up in church, we've listened to the live and Azusa albums. He was T.D. Jakes before there was T.D. Jakes. If he had not fallen, there would be no T.D. Jakes, if you really pay attention to his story. But if you also look at his story, when he fell out with the white congregation that he was affiliated with, and I'm not saying this is necessarily going to happen, but I want us to look at the fallout of what happened. When he lost his church, when he lost his congregation, when he had to auction his church, he had to auction everything down to the pews. And who got that? White churches and organizations. If you look at Axfield Gospel as a building and as a space right there in East Oakland, that is a prime real estate location, whether you want to put a church there or anything else. So it would really benefit an organization that does not want Black folks in that community to either help him gain mobility so he can be on their side or help him get wiped the fuck out. Either way. So we need to pay very close attention, because like I said, it's not just non-Black POC churches that are trying to take over Black churches who over time have built these huge buildings. I saw there was a church in San Francisco when I used to drive Lyft all the time, and I would always see it. It was a huge church. I don't remember if it was near the Castro or where it was, but it was a huge Black church. And I remember for the longest time, they had a sign that said that they were having this crab feed. And it turned out the crab feed was to try and save the church. And then one day I went up there and that church was for sale. And we were talking about how the Black church, which used to be so thriving in San Francisco, I remember going there all the time, and how, it's pretty much dead. So we really need to pay very close attention to what happens with Axfield Gospel in, I say, the next year.
Yep, I agree.
And the white politicians and all of those other resources you're talking about, they see the Black church as the equal to the Black vote.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And even in my neighborhood, we see it here. How many folks been to the Love Center, which is a car dealership, right? We know that they don't own the property. They're able to use it because no one wants that property at the moment. Same thing with another dealership. This used to be an auto row, right? Where we are. This used to be an auto row, full of dealerships where most of Oakland would come here to buy cars before they would go downtown Oakland. That's a whole other story. But there's churches occupying those spaces. I don't see the Love Center being here another year or two. I don't see that other church being here another year or two. If y'all remember a few weeks ago, I posted a picture of, even though it's senior housing, but how many seniors going to be alive to move into the senior housing when it's done if people trying to tell all the seniors to go to church? And so we do have to pay attention and follow whatever money or partnerships that are being done with organizations and these Black churches. I just want to thank everybody. This was really dope. I'm pretty sure we could continue going on and on and on and on and on. But we started a little bit after 1, so this goes to show.
Jill Scott, Erica Badu.
I was about to say we was on Badu time.
We was definitely on some Auntie Jill and Badu time. But it just goes to show that like these conversations are needed. They need to happen. And I really appreciate both Carolyn and Courtney taking the time out of their day to be a part of this and contributing, and everybody who chimed in and to listen, and to those who contributed as well. And who knows, maybe we'll see where this continues to go. Maybe we can talk about it again, or some other hot topics. But thanks everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Sunday.
Bye.
Peace.
Peace.